Hey everyone, welcome back to FPL Fran. Today's video is going to be my matchday 1 cheat sheet. It is the final version of the cheat sheet that you'll see available before the tournament starts. Hopefully, of course, with the remaining friendlies that we have left, not too much information can be learned. I think the most significant thing is, for example, with teams like Ukraine who have sort of rotated their goalkeepers, that probably is the one outstanding piece of information that I would hold most dear and want to find out about. That isn't really reflected on this current version of the cheat sheet. You'll notice that there's going to be an asterisk on Lunin. But for the most part, I think we've gotten a lot of information from the friendlies. We have some key injuries as well, big changes to teams. And here we are, final version of the cheat sheet. If you've never seen the cheat sheet before, it's effectively a video where I tier list all the players in different positions based on their price point. So it's kind of like a player efficiency or pricing system. I rate players from green, where I consider them as great options, yellow options being good, and then orange options being differential. So really, I would only go there if you are 100% certain on a player's minutes who might be currently uncertain, or of course you want to take a gamble deliberately from an ownership perspective and taking that sort of risk on. Anyways, let's get started with the midfielders cheat sheet. So the midfielders cheat sheet is quite interesting. I think from the budget positions, nothing much has really changed. I do think that some people are obviously eyeing up some options that are 4.5 million, but in my opinion, you are really sort of clutching at straws if you're just trying to go for a sort of Georgian midfielder. With Jorginho, I think the most interesting thing about him is that Spalletti has mentioned that he's most likely to stay on penalties for the time being. I heard some people sort of question, within the sort of midfielders guide that I produced, that Jorginho missing 4 penalties, of course, is something to be cautious about. And whilst that's true, and whilst Jorginho's minutes, I think, are not 100% guaranteed within this Italian team, the reality still is that they still have a great game versus Albania. He is still an enabler, and at least based on our understanding, he's still the penalty taker for Italy. I think the biggest thing as well is that some of the key penalty takers historically from Italy have gone. So responding to that point too, I think only Scamacca really deserves to be, I suppose, on penalties, given that he actually has a pretty good record right now within his small career. So 6-0 right now, but I still think Jorginho's on pens, and that just makes him a great enabling option. Vitinha and Goulet are still interesting, right? Goulet actually played a friendly last night, and he played brilliant in the 45 minutes coming on as a substitute. So I think a lot of fans, particularly even Turkish fans, are very excited to see Goulet play, but his minutes are still non-guaranteed. So when you're going for the punt for Goulet here, it is quite an ambitious punt as well, because first of all, you need to be guaranteed that his minutes will be reflected specifically within the Georgia game, where that punt is most likely going to bear fruit. Otherwise, of course, you have to be staring at a Portugal game as well. As an overall strategic point as well, I think it's worth mentioning that a lot of teams actually, particularly, for example, Switzerland, Ukraine, have really good fixtures in matchday 1 and matchday 2. So when you notice that I've shown a preference towards some players within those teams, it's simply because I am more catering towards matchday 1 and matchday 2. Whilst you can also see matchday 3 within the graphic here, the reality is a lot of us have chips available saved for matchday 3. Some people might have a differential strategy. They might use limitless in matchday 2. So therefore, of course, you're either only caring about matchday 1 or matchday 1 and matchday 3 as a group. But as I said, take less of account into matchday 3. Try to look at the teams and the fixtures for matchday 1 and matchday 2 specifically. My data preview guide effectively covers this, so feel free to check out that video if you're keen on, for example, looking at what is the best clean sheet odds for players on different chip strategies, or teams from different chip strategies rather. And the same thing with goal involvements, team goals, and that sort of thing. So if you're keen on that sort of insight from a chip strategy perspective, have a look at this. I've already catered all the players here towards matchday 1 and matchday 2. Matchday 3 is just for illustrative purposes. Going quickly towards the 6.5 million position, the only change here I think that I've moved Shaqiri up, and once again it comes back down to Switzerland having great games. However, the manager has already mentioned, which is sort of lining up with my thoughts, right? I mentioned that Shaqiri obviously is a little bit of a aged player, and clearly he doesn't have the ability to be match fit to play 90 minutes in a row for 2 games. And the interesting thing, of course, is that arguably Switzerland's best game is versus Hungary, which is match day 1. So if you're thinking about, let's say, a fit Shaqiri who was rested within his last friendly, arguably in match day 1, you'd see the most amount of minutes coming from him there. However, the managers also mentioned that he can't play 90 minutes every 4 days. So I think the concern, I suppose, is whether he can actually make it to the Scotland game and start. I think he should. I think it's very likely what we'll see from Shaqiri is that he'll have diminished minutes overall, for example, even within the Hungary game, and therefore him being an earlier substitute within that game is very likely, but that should allow him to start for match day 2. I still think, though, because the fixtures are so good, because he's also got access to penalties and other sort of intangibles, that Shaqiri is still a great option, and that's that. With Çalhanoğlu, of course, you're looking at an option specifically to target match day 1. Once again, though, I said Güler for me is the most interesting punt if you can really go for a Turkish midfielder, but you can't guarantee his minutes in match day 1. So it is tough, and I think a lot of people do have to consider that element of the game. With Granit Xhaka, for example, it's a little bit more dull going for him. He is simply sort of a ball recovery merchant for the purposes of this fantasy game. And you can see that, of course, when it comes to, for example, his expected numbers. Going towards Rodri, the biggest change here is that I think he's Spain's penalty taker. So regardless of the fact that the fixtures are tough, he actually does have substantial Spanish goal share. Not much assist share, given that him and Fabian are most likely to play sort of deeper, progressive roles within the Spanish team. And you're very unlikely to see, for example, Rodri get into the sort of nice pockets that he does, like he does with Man City at times. So I think Rodri is arguably someone who you're picking because he meets a lot of other of the elements of the game that are nice. Ball recoveries are extremely high with Rodri, compared to some of the competing options at this price point. And at the same time, what's nice about Rodri too is, of course, if you argue that, the case that he is Spain's best player, there is obviously chances that Rodri can get man of the match. Although I think attacking players are more than likely to get that. For example, Lamine Yamal, Pedri, and I think those players are within that sort of shout. And then when it comes down to Toni Kroos, he's actually been upgraded as well. I think part of that is just simply recognizing that, first of all, I think Kroos's sort of ball recovery numbers are not poor. Second of all, if he's got access to a lot of set pieces for Germany, I think that's just still a very, very good price point to look at Toni Kroos. I think the argument to make about Toni Kroos, however, is that a good use of your triple up on Germany? I think Germany actually have a very favorable group. That's why you can see that the fixtures are very good. And so it doesn't necessarily make sense to just go for Kroos because he's an enabler. You probably actually want to sort of maximize, right, how you spend the budget on Germany. That doesn't necessarily mean that you should go for the most expensive triple up of Germany, but it just means that, is Kroos price efficient compared to some of the other German midfielders? Maybe, maybe not. As far as McTominay, still not that keen because unfortunately the way the fixtures are sort of laid out for Scotland is the worst way possible. You might even want to consider McTominay by match day 3, but for now I think he's very much so differential. And the same with John McGinn as well, if you're thinking about him as an option. At the 7 million position, we have Gundogan, who actually just has incredible sort of odds when I look at the market. So I think he's very clearly, and you can see in my data preview video as well, that he is clearly one of the sort of underpriced 7 million players in the game. Now, a lot of people, and even I myself included, have mentioned that his minutes can be reduced, particularly playing within an advanced midfielder role. And you can argue, of course, those early substitutions is because maybe Nagelsmann hasn't been exactly happy with how, for example, the attacking link-up has worked with the sort of attacking front four. So that is something worth looking at, but I still think, once again, Germany have nice fixtures and Gundogan should start the first 2 games. So I'm not really concerned about his value. As long as he plays 65 minutes, 70 minutes, I still think he's a very, very good punt. Szoboszlai and Eriksen are almost the opposite of that, right? You have players here who are more guaranteed to play their minutes. Szoboszlai very good at ball recoveries. Obviously, we don't have great expectations for Hungary, but he is almost the key player within the team. The coach has also confirmed that he's going to be playing a free role. And talking about the free role here and the 7 million price points, we effectively have Szoboszlai as a 10, Eriksen as a 10, and Pedri as well as a 10. De La Fuente as well, Spanish coach, has also mentioned Pedri playing in between the lines. So that's very, very nice for people who want to sort of think about Pedri as a differential punt. The key thing, of course, that concerns me with Pedri, of course, is that he doesn't have the intangibles that Szoboszlai and Eriksen have, like, for example, additional set pieces, maybe penalties as well. And Pedri, of course, is just, you're looking at someone who's just purely sort of going to operate from open play, and you're looking at him to sort of take a leap compared to what he does domestically in Barcelona, where he's just a center mid, and of course his historical performances for Spain, where he's also previously mostly played in a center mid position. Another thing that I'll also mention, of course, is, once again, Spain's fixtures unfortunately do not lay out very well, and the reason why, of course, I sort of do like Rodri is that, once again, in even tougher fixtures, you have, for example, the access to the ball recoveries, whilst obviously if you're just someone who is going to benefit from open play, goals and assists, you're probably going to benefit a little bit less from that, like someone like Pedri. And I think the same application argument applies to Barella as well. Even though he has such a great fixture in match day 1, I just can't really justify it because I think he's potentially arguably not that fit as well. I think another point to mention too is, unfortunately, of course, he's just playing a center mid role, right? So even though Barella is a great player and we know his talents, I just think he's a little bit overpriced for what he is going to offer for the purposes of this game. With Xavi Simons, we saw another great performance from him, at least for the first time within the Dutch national team. So what worked really well, of course, is, Dumfries just playing that sort of overlapping role, Simons allowing to sort of play within the central positions. And I think what is nice, of course, is that is a very different vibe to, let's say, Frimpong playing in a right wing position. My concern, of course, is with Simons and Frimpong that you can't really guarantee the minutes for either player. And it's very likely, because of how strong the depth is within that sort of position, that you're probably going to see reduced minutes for Simons and Frimpong. And then, of course, matchday 2 is a sort of dampener for when you want to go for, let's say, a Dutch player. So I have cooled off a little bit on Simons, but I still think his performance within the friendly was brilliant versus Iceland. And so it's very hard to sort of get this position right, in my opinion. I think you're still probably better served with players who have more guaranteed minutes and ultimately better fixtures, or have additional intangibles, even though I think Simons is a brilliant player. And as I said, this is his best performance to date for his national team. With Kvaratskhelia and Mudryk, I think they have less intangibles compared to Szoboszlai and Eriksson, and part of that too is the fixtures, unfortunately, because of the sort of evaluation of team strengths and things like that too. Mudryk, of course, just less access to things like penalties, etc. Kvaratskhelia, obviously, key talisman for this Georgian team, but our expectations for them, unfortunately, are not that high either. So hard to see whether they can really overperform despite the two nicest fixtures being laid out there for your Georgian midfielder. Another point I'll make too is, I think, Czech Republic, probably a team that we think are quite good and probably a little bit underrated when it comes to this group, right? I think we're probably expecting them to potentially be, competing with Turkey to come out of this group. And I think, unfortunately, when you look at it, even though the fixtures are nicer for Georgia, you also have to sort of put them in context that they are the worst team in that group on paper. And then in the 7.5 position, no changes here. We have Wirtz, I think, who is, with the asterisks removed. But I think, of course, we saw Sane, come on as a substitute. And I think simply the German national team will incorporate the use of substitutes within this tournament. I think that's something that you can't ignore. Wirtz, Gundogan, potentially even Musiala, I think around the 82nd minute, that sort of thing, a little bit later of a substitute, will all probably come off the field at one point for different sorts of players, right? We have a lot of depth within the German team. You have players like Furyk who can play multiple spots within the midfield positions. You have players like Sane, of course, who can easily come off the bench and be electric. Fulkrug, for example, can be a substitute for Gundogan, and Havertz can play different roles within the team as well. So I think the point to make is, if you can get the German national team lineup, for me, Wirtz is still a great option. Musiala is still a good option. That's sort of how I view things. The same with Gundogan as well. As far as Modric, once again, fixture-wise, it isn't great, and I just think that he's a little bit overpriced for what he provides, although Croatia have looked like a really solid team, and within the friendlies, of course, already shocked Portugal with a very strong result. In the sort of 8 million to 8.5 million position, I think Trossard remains as a great pick. So does Saka. These are the two options that I favor the most. I think their minutes are still relatively safe. I think Trossard really should be starting for Belgium, and any sort of discussion about whether he's nailed or not should probably go towards the wayside, at least when it comes to match day 1. And then when it comes to Saka, once again, I think the biggest thing and the biggest asterisk around Saka is probably, around his injury and sort of what his ability to play 90 minutes is going to look like for this English team. Now, if you don't think he's going to play significant minutes, I do think that also hampers, Saka and his value within the game. But he is 8.5 million, which is actually, in my opinion, a little bit low, and probably prices in some of that injury doubt as well. So I do think that Saka is still really good value. With Musiala, I do like him a lot, but of course, when you look at, for example, the national team numbers, it's not particularly high. And I think a fair point to make as well is that German offense hasn't really clicked too well. But you can make the same argument, I suppose, with the English national team, although Saka has, not really played starting minutes yet. Neither has Foden, neither has Bellingham. So, for example, that starting front four that we expect from England, which is sort of like Foden, Bellingham, Saka, and Kane, we haven't really seen them all play together in the friendly. So I think it's worth mentioning too that is a little bit different to, let's say, the German national team, where we've actually seen, in effect, their ideal starting four play, and it hasn't looked brilliant until, for example, you have substitutes coming on for Germany and sort of saving the day. As far as, let's say, the premium position, no changes here. I'm very high on Fernandes. I'm very high on De Bruyne. For me, I think the only concern really with the English midfielders is that they might be a touch overpriced, because ultimately when you look at, for example, the quality of the group for England, and you compare that to Portugal and Belgium, I do think that there is a difference, right? England probably do have arguably a tougher group. And when it comes to, let's say, Fernandes and De Bruyne, I just think that there are so much more key players for their own respective teams that it's likely that their minutes will be much better than, let's say, the Fodens of the world and the Bellinghams of the world as well. Maybe Bellingham probably will have really good minutes, because I can't see there being a natural substitute unless you, let's say, consider, let's say, putting Palmer within the team as well and taking him off. But it's more than likely I think Palmer will probably substitute someone like Saka, and then someone like Eze as well will probably find it easier, or with Gordon as well, to sub off someone like Foden. But anyways, those are my thoughts. And I think, as I mentioned too, Bellingham obviously hasn't really produced as much as you'd expect given his sort of stellar season for Real Madrid historically for England. But part of that too, of course, is that he will be moving into effectively a new role for England, and that can be very exciting, and I think that's very good. As far as the forwards, just quickly shifting over there, not too many changes in this position in terms of the premium players, but I have made some changes around the budget players. Yamal has risen up in my expectations. Part of that obviously is because I think I didn't want to be too high on Yamal as a Spaniard, considering that obviously our fixtures are very tough, and I think it is tough to sort of envision a lot of people going for budget players within the forward position, because I just think that you have really good players at exceptional price points, like, for example, Havertz and Lukaku. And then obviously, because you want really strong captaincy options as well, it's hard to sort of remove yourselves from the Ronaldos, the Mbappes, and the Kanes of the world, who are already three options. And it's very likely that you're only going to go with 2 out of 3 of them, which means that you probably only have room for one other budget player. And it's tough, I think, to go for Yamal, just simply because, unfortunately, once again, it comes down to Spain just having their best fixture versus Albania in matchday 3. With Dusan Tadic, he actually has a really good fixture in matchday 2, but then matchday 1 is a very tough English fixture. And even though I think he has really good historic numbers for Serbia and just in general is a very key player for their team, I unfortunately still think that, he's not really worth the gamble per se within matchday 1. Now, you can obviously consider Tadic as an option matchday 2 to sort of jump into as a pick. And then I think with Salah and Shankland, that's really just pure budget. Would I really consider them within my team? Honestly, not. But if you're trying to create a construction of a team where you're kind of going all out within the midfielders, you're trying to, I suppose, guess the midfielders are going to score more goals and therefore get more points and clean sheets as well, that's going to have an impact on how you build your team. But I really would probably pass up on these options, because I just think that the expectations for Scotland aren't that high, considering, as I said, the way that their fixtures are laid out. And then unfortunately with just Hungary, overall how we evaluate them, not exactly that high on those options. In the 7 million position, I do think you have options that are very, very serious contenders to the Havertz and Lukaku's, and that for me is Doku and Skamaka. And also when you look further down the 7.5 million position, Chiesa and Dovbyk. I wanted to talk about them all together because I think the consideration, of course, is going to be, is it worth dropping someone like Havertz? And in my opinion, I still think I'd probably pick Havertz over most of these options. And the reality is, he can play multiple flexible roles for this German team. And I think even the coach is very, wary of that. He's not an old player, an aged player per se at all. And it means that he can play multiple roles without having to be subbed off, which I think is very nice. Now, obviously, he can be subbed off. You have players like Muller in the team, Fulkrug in the team, who can clearly, take Havertz's position away. But he's been confirmed to start as a center forward. This was the big shift in news compared to the previous iteration of the cheat sheet. And I do think Germany, once again, have really good fixtures. So when it comes down to it, I just really love the Havertz punt. As far as Doku and Skamaka, though, they also have really good value to them, right? Skamaka and Chiesa, these are options where, particularly if you're going for this sort of all-out attack strategy within the group stage, you're going for limitless and wildcard within the group stages, it does make a lot of sense to target these sorts of players on match day 1, because when you look at, for example, the sort of predicted goals or even the goal scoring odds for match day 1, it is actually the case that Skamaka and even Chiesa have better goal scoring odds than someone like Havertz, just simply because the fixture versus Albania is so well rated. As far as Doku, it is a case where I think he's very good, but is he better than someone like Havertz? Maybe not. It might just be the case where, of course, if you do need to save 0.5 million for whatever reason, then you can consider Doku as an option. Although keep in mind, of course, he is much less of a goal threat. He is much more of an assist threat. And that's very similar with Yamal and Tadic as well, who are in cheaper price points. But unfortunately, with the way the fixtures are laid out for them, not so interesting from a match day 1 perspective. And with Mitrovic and Schick, I still think that these are options, once again, more so to consider for match day 2. In my data preview, I talked about how you probably do want to target potentially a Serbian pick, potentially as well a Czech pick as well in matchday 2 because the fixtures are very kind for them there. With Sesko, I have added him as a differential, but I still think that he's a little bit overpriced, to be honest, for the value that we're going to expect within his team and their ability to sort of produce as well. And I think it just comes down to, for example, if I look at Schick, do I think Czech is stronger? I do, and that's sort of how I evaluated that as well. With Depay, he gets a rise as well. I think he's a good option, but keep in mind, of course, he still has that sort of French unfortunate matchday 2 fixture. So that makes Depay a little bit tougher as an option. I think he's building match fitness, which is very nice. And clearly, of course, he is important and integral towards the Dutch national team. So I really think that Depay is a good option. But is he a great option considering that you have options like Chiesa and Scamacca in matchday 1? If you really want to go for that sort of matchday 1 exclusive punt, probably not. Højlund Gakpo is still a little bit dull to me, so I think I've kept them as differentials. Same with Lewandowski. Otherwise, I think all the other forward options are amazing. With Griezmann, I think you have to sort of buy into the element that Griezmann could be the key player of this French team if Mbappe, for example, is going to have a less than stellar performance, right? For example, when you looked at the World Cup where Griezmann actually played brilliant, he was actually man of the match for multiple games, and he was playing a lot more of a creative sort of role, but I think that was also recognized by the people who were actually, voting for things like man of the match. He's also someone who's very good at ball recoveries, so his route towards points is very different to the traditional archetypal center forwards that we have within this list with Lukaku and Ronaldo, for example. And clearly, of course, Mbappe and Kane a little bit more creative as players, but ultimately that's why they're also extremely well priced, I suppose, given that they're captaincy optioned, and we know they have substantial goal share too. So that's the forwards update. And then moving on towards the defense, keep in mind, I think that my fixture difficulty rankings have been constantly updated. They've been updated with the help of my friend 11ify and his team model, where he continuously updates his clean sheet odds, his goal scoring odds, and things like that. And that has a huge impact, on how our expectations of teams are set up before the tournament starts. And of course, these are updated with real time, with sort of reflection as well towards the friendly data that we have and even the lineup data that we have. What I'll say about the defender position is that it has changed substantially since I have last made my cheat sheet. The biggest thing that I'll mention is that I think I've sort of opened my eye towards a lot more 4.5 million options, and a lot more cheaper options have also shown up within the game that I think a lot of people should care about. Another thing too, I think, is probably because of the sort of news of Maguire coming out of the English national team. My expectations for, let's say, English defense or the England defense, of course, has dropped a little bit as well, which means that you have a lot more options now to sort of milk your team with 4 million options, which also allow you to get the more expensive options in other positions, like in the midfield position, if you want to double up on Fernandes and De Bruyne. That is something I think a lot of managers are considering. And so the best way to do this is to make sure that you get reasonably good defensive options, but not, for example, the most cheapest options in the game. So yes, of course, whilst you can make a defense entirely consisting of 4 million players, would I necessarily recommend it? Probably not. However, we just really have some great price points here, and it even starts at the 4 million price point. So once again, with Mittelstadt, I think if he starts in match day 1, he's a lock for most of our teams. With Wout Faes, this is incredible, right? With Vertonghen seemingly unfit, you can argue that he's now the first choice center back within the team. And even if Vertonghen comes back, he could still be the second choice. So he could still very well start in match day 2 or match day 3. And that's very significant for Belgium. What I do love about Belgium, though, is that their group looks really good. The clean sheet odds look very, very good. In fact, I think they're top 2 with Germany. And that means that De Kuiper is a great option as well, because alongside the Munier injury, who they probably won't risk until match day 3, maybe later on in the tournament as well, De Kuiper has played really well. And I think you're just going to see that these 2 Belgian options are just supreme to sort of work with. Now, the question, I suppose, is whether you're willing to drop someone like De Bruyne to get the access to the double Belgian defense. Is it worth it for me? Probably not. I'd still probably choose one option between Faes and De Kuiper, and I do think that Faes is still at a ridiculous price point. So if you can, for example, get upgrades elsewhere, I don't think it's necessarily needed, for example, to just get an attacking left back within your team, because I do think that, for example, a De Kuiper is still very good, but you can still get access to, for example, things like set piece goals from Wout Faes, and it's not necessarily the case that De Kuiper has established himself as some sort of world-class attacking fullback, which very clearly reflects some of the options that are more expensive within the game. As far as the other 4.5 options, a lot of green options here coming from teams like England, Ukraine, and Switzerland. And just to talk about them overall, I think all their clean sheet odds are very, very similar. The last time I looked at, for example, my friend 1105's website and the clean sheet odds for matchday 1 and matchday 2 combined, it was very, very similar between all these teams. So the fact that you're going to get access to these defenders, particularly on a wildcard 5 strategy, is very, very strong. At the same time, of course, if you're focused more towards that sort of matchday 1 element side of things, Cambiasso, I think, is a brilliant punt, right? The idea that you can maybe get access to someone who could start for Italy at 4 million, playing in an attacking position, and maybe obviously coming off as an early substitute is very interesting. I think the same argument does apply to Widmer as well, who usually comes off a little bit earlier for Switzerland and plays more of that sort of right mid type role for the team. So that is quite interesting when it comes to those options, because those options don't have guaranteed nailed minutes, but you can argue that they're arguably underpriced for the sort of out of position element of their game. As far as Christiansen, he's more of a matchday 1 pick. If you kind of think that Denmark will line up with, let's say, Christiansen Ba or Christiansen Mæhle, if Mæhle's fit and finally ready to sort of actually start games, which I think he will. I think he's just getting rested towards matchday 1, and I do think Mæhle will play. And it's more than likely, of course, that this Danish team will actually feature Christiansen over Ba anyway. So I think that his position within the team is quite locked. I think his price point is very good, but once again, it's more a case of you just specifically targeting matchday 1 with Denmark, which, changes obviously based on your chip strategy. As far as the other options in the green positions, these are options who are, I think, fantastic and stand out specifically for matchday 1 and matchday 2. With Goncalo Inacio, I think the only thing that I'll probably mention here is that I still don't think he's nailed within the team, but I think it's worth sort of putting asterisks around him if you want to sort of get access to the Portuguese defense for whatever reason, but also sort of ignore the attacking fullbacks within the team, then I guess you can consider him as an option. I still think it's not really worth the cost, the opportunity cost. There are more nailed players, as you can see with Zabarny, with Konoplia as well, who's also a fullback, by the way, keep in mind for this Ukraine team. That could be more interesting anyways, because the clean sheet odds are very similar between a Portugal and some of the other teams who actually have better clean sheet odds between matchdays 1 and matchday 2. As far as the 5 million position, this is a position where I think we've had the least amount of changes. The sort of premium picks here are DeMarco, Stones, and Castagna. I don't think that's changed, but the idea with Castagna being a premium is simply just because Belgium defense is very, very well rated heading towards this tournament. The reality is, though, of course, if you're building for a team, I don't see the need to spend 5 million on Castagna. You should still be going for Wout Faes. You should still be going for De Kuyper as well. As far as Nuno Mendes, I think it might be the case that he actually is the starting fullback over Dallo, but I really have no full guarantees or understanding of that. In my opinion, it's still a huge punt to take Nuno Mendes or a huge punt to take Diogo Dallo. I would probably pass up on this opportunity. I think Cancelo will definitely start, but because, of course, Cancelo, as we know, can play both fullback positions, it's just not something you're probably wanting to sort of deal with when it comes to the rotation possibilities between Nuno Mendes and Diogo Dallo, even though, of course, Nuno Mendes can be an extremely attacking fullback on his day, and if you could actually get the minutes right and you can get, let's say, Mendes guaranteed to play 2 games in matchday 1 and matchday 2, then, of course, he becomes immediately a green option, but I can't guarantee that right now, so I'd pass on that. With Akanji, I think he's just a little bit overpriced, considering you have access to Schär and Widmer. I'd probably pass up on him, to be honest, if I was considering a Swiss option. Ultimately, of course, Sommer is also 5 million, so it's a little bit different with the goalkeeping positions because we don't have as many budget steals outside of Lunin, in my opinion. As far as Laporte, I still think you have to pass up on Spain because the fixtures just aren't lined up the same way. In the 5.5 million position, we have Theo Hernandez, obviously just a super attacking option, and clearly there is an element of him not necessarily being that attacking, for France, I suppose, positionally speaking, and maybe within just the tactical structure, but he is still a world-class fullback, and I think he's going to be a great pick. With Trent, we've already heard news that he's going to start within the midfield in matchday 1, and I don't think that necessarily means that he's going to be benched for matchday 2, but that already just means that he's very exciting as a pick. So therefore, I think Trent, for the people who are gamblers and who kind of like the idea of going for Trent and all the intangibles that he brings, like through set pieces and a lot of other actions in open play as well, and his ability to maybe even move into the right back position at times, I just think that makes Trent super exciting as a pick. But with Mæhle, I do expect him to start matchday 1, but their asterisk is still there to sort of reflect the idea that he is not fully fit, and we haven't seen significant significant minutes from him, but I think he's very well placed to actually start match day one. So I do think that he's going to be a great pick, particularly for those, as I said, who are going for that sort of all-out chip strategy in the group stages. As far as the other options, I think I've actually dropped Bastoni and Rudiger. Part of that is because, in my opinion, you have to sort of pay respect to, within the German national team, much cheaper options being available with Bastoni as well. When it comes down to it, I do think that the potential option of Cambiaso, the option of DeMarco at cheaper prices, just means that he is more interesting. Bastoni, of course, is someone who, is an incredible sort of threat as a center back, right? You don't really just traditionally see him as a pure center back. He's very good at ball progression, even has a cross towards his game as well. So I think he's interesting. And Rudiger, of course, is very good at set pieces and attacking them as well. Was a key player for Real Madrid for set pieces this season. But are they really worth that sort of premium price? In my opinion, I'd probably say no. So I think I'd probably pass up on these options when it comes down to it. As far as Dumfries, I think he's going to start versus Poland, and that sort of makes Frimpong's position a little bit dicey, right? Because I think Frimpong is most likely placed to play within the right wing position, but I already talked about Xavi Simons and how that's going to have a huge impact on his minutes. I've put an asterisk on Frimpong because I think if you do think Frimpong starts versus Poland, he becomes a great option, particularly on that sort of all-out attack strategy. But if you're not sure about that, that makes Frimpong very precarious as a pick, and you probably want to pass up on Frimpong, to be honest, because I don't think the gamble is necessarily worth it. Even though, of course, if you can get right wing versus Poland right, you're probably going to be in the money. With Guardiola, I think that he's playing in such great attacking positions for Croatia. I wasn't really expecting for this to happen within the Croatian national team, but he's occupied a lot of spots within the friendlies that I think are outrageous. And I just think that when it comes down to it, a lot of people should be trying to open up their strategy to make sure that they have enough room in the bank to get towards Guardiola in match day 2. So for me, that is something that is going to be very significant for managers to think about. And that's something that I will definitely be considering within my own chip strategy and my own match day 1 draft. So Guardiola definitely someone to look towards, but keep in mind, of course, Spain is probably the toughest fixture within their group and maybe the best team in that group as well. And so it's going to be tough to sort of see the value for Guardiola being realized in match day 1. Although, of course, when it comes down to it, he is a very exciting player when it comes to world football. As far as Carvajal, once again, just reflecting the idea that Spain's fixtures aren't not great. He doesn't even have a good match day 2 fixture, so ultimately it's just reflected as such. As far as the 6 million position, Van Dijk is just, 2 back-to-back goals in friendlies, fair enough. We still think that there's a small chance he might take penalties, but I really think that Depay could take them anyways. Keep in mind that when Koeman actually mentioned that penalties were for Van Dijk, that Depay was injured at the time, so maybe that has changed. We haven't had necessarily a full update or a full authority on that, but I still think that even a chance of that Van Dijk's on penalties is interesting. And of course, when you actually look at, for example, some of the betting odds as well, Van Dijk is clear actually when it comes to all the defenders within the game for goal share. So very interesting. As far as Cancelo and Diaz, options that I'd probably pass on when it comes to Diaz, because at that sort of price point, I do think it's a little bit too ridiculous to sort of ask for a player just because he's nailed for Portugal. Cancelo, of course, you can probably argue that he is very much at times, worth it. Actually, when it comes to being a fullback, he makes a lot of ball recoveries per game. And you can see that reflected when it comes to some of the competing options here. Only really someone like Mittelstadt or Guardiola have the sort of similar amounts of ball recoveries. So something to mention. As far as Cancelo, of course, when it comes to the attacking side of play, of course, historically another great player as well. But whether he's really worth 6 million, I think is also another question to ask. Whether you really need to spend that 6 million on the defensive positions when you have access to such cheap options that are very, very good still, I think is definitely something that's worth considering for managers to think about. As far as the goalkeepers here, rounding off as well, no real changes other than the idea that we have Casteels, who is completely nailed, which means that Sells has been removed from the game. I know a lot of people are actually looking towards 4 million goalkeepers, like, for example, potential Turkish goalkeepers, but I really have to say that I have no interest whatsoever within going towards the sort of 4 million price point of goalkeepers. Yes, of course, when you look at the lineups as well for Turkey in the previous friendly, we saw Gunok play, who's actually 4.5 million. So that already throws out the idea that you can maybe get access to the Turkish goalkeeper. You could, of course, have access to maybe the Romanian goalkeeper, but even I think within the Hungarian team, we're starting to see that Gulakshi is starting to play. So that obviously takes out another 4 million goalkeeper. So for me, I think the value really comes from the 4.5s. Verbruggen is an interesting one, right? Whether you want to go for a Dutch player because he actually has really good match day 1 clean sheet odds is quite nice. And we Fortunately, we're also confirmed by Koeman that he's going to start as the Dutch goalkeeper. So I think that's very, very lovely. As far as Lunin, in my opinion, I do really think that he's the starting goalkeeper, but I can't guarantee that. That's why there's an asterisk. Trubin has started a lot of fixtures for Ukraine. Although the last time that we saw competitive fixtures for Ukraine, we actually saw when Lunin and Trubin were both available, that Lunin actually started 2 fixtures. And when it comes down to it, of course, Lunin's going to play his last friendly for Ukraine. It might be the case that the coach will speak on it, but I do think there's definitely going to be a small little doubt on whether Lunin is actually the starting goalkeeper. It might still be worth the punt, though, because the clean sheet odds for Ukraine are amazing for match day 1 and match day 2 combined. As far as the 5 million goalkeepers, I just think we have a lot of options that are very close and very similar when it comes to clean sheet odds, and they're all great picks. Pickford, Casteels, Costa, Sommer. I'd definitely say that they're all very close. Potentially, Casteels is the best option here, but it also comes down to, once again, when you look at the defenders, actually, Casteels has a lot of competing options that are cheaper. So Wout Faes and De Kuiper. With Pickford, it's only Guehi. With Costa, you arguably can only say Inacio, I suppose, is cheaper, or at least you can argue that Nuno Mendes, Joe Dallo are the same price. So there's no sort of, steal for the Portuguese defense. And then with Switzerland, once again, you have access to players like Fabian Schär at 4.5 million or Widmer at 4.5. So I'd probably still pass up on someone like Sommer if you can get access to the Swiss defense there instead. And then with Schmeichel, it's more so a match day 1 punt, but I still don't think it's that interesting. The same case goes for Mike Nan, who unfortunately also faces the Dutch national team in match day 2. All the other options for me are a little bit dull just because of the way the fixtures are going and also the sort of overrated price points of certain players. And I think part of this, of course, is because, when you look at someone like Unai Simon, if Spain advance in the tournament and maybe have a favorable bracket, we could very well go towards Spain. We could also go towards Spanish players in match day 3 when we use our limitless chip as well. So, I'd probably pass up on players like that now, but definitely can be options later on in the tournament, and we'll consider that in due course. That's going to be the cheat sheet. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Extremely long video, but I thought it was just worth capturing my thoughts on all the players and giving you guys this final update ahead of hopefully a fantastic Euro tournament. So see you guys soon. Take care and goodbye.